What if Ichigo got Unohana pregnant during training with her? The stairs descended into absolute blackness, each step taking Ichigo Kurosaki deeper into the bowels of Soul Society than he'd ever imagined existed. The Muken, the 8th and lowest level of the underground prison, wasn't supposed to exist in any practical sense. It was infinite, or so the legends claimed, a void where Soul Society imprisoned those too dangerous to execute and too powerful to contain anywhere else. Ichigo's hand rested on Zangetsu's hilt as he walked, not from fear, but from habit. The air grew heavier with each descending step, thick with spiritual pressure that would have crushed a normal soul. Behind him, the heavy door that sealed the Muken had already closed, cutting off the last glimmer of light from the world above. Keep walking, Ichigo Kurosaki. The voice emerged from the darkness ahead, feminine, calm, with an undercurrent of something that made his instincts scream danger. He'd heard that voice before in the sterile halls of the 4th Division, always gentle, always accompanied by a serene smile. But down here, in this lightless pit, it carried a different weight entirely. Captain Unohana, Ichigo acknowledged, his eyes finally adjusting to make out a silhouette in the gloom. Or should I call you something else down here? A soft laugh echoed through the infinite space. Perceptive. Had Captain Yamamoto told you then? Enough. Ichigo's grip tightened slightly on his sword. He said you were the only one who could teach me what I need to know. That you were the first Kenpachi, before Zaraki. That you've killed more people than anyone in Soul Society's history. All true. The silhouette moved closer, and Ichigo could finally make out her features. Retsu Unohana stood before him, but something was different. Her hair, normally braided neat and proper, hung loose and wild. Her kind smile had been replaced by something sharper, more predatory. But titles and history lessons won't prepare you for what's coming, substitute Shinigami. The Quincy aren't like the Arankar you've faced. Yawatch isn't like Aizen, that's why I'm here. No. Unohana drew her sword in one fluid motion, the blade singing as it cleared the sheath. You're here because you're weak. You have power, tremendous power, but you fight like a child swinging a stick. You have no true understanding of the blade, no connection to the art of killing. And that will get you and everyone you love killed. The spiritual pressure that erupted from her nearly drove Ichigo to his knees. It was different from Yamamoto's burning intensity, or Aizen's crushing weight. This was sharper, more focused, the pressure of a blade pressed against your throat, the certainty of death hovering one heartbeat away. Ichigo forced himself to stand straight, to meet her eyes. They'd changed too, he realized. Gone was the warm concern he'd seen when she healed him after his battle with Grimmjow. These eyes belonged to someone who had stood atop mountains of corpses, who had earned the title of Kenpachi through an ocean of blood. Then teach me, Ichigo said, drawing Zangetsu. That's why I came down here. No holding back, no pretending. I need to be strong enough to protect Soul Society, to protect my friends, to protect everyone. Unohana's expression softened slightly, though the dangerous edge never left her stance. Such a burden for someone so young. Tell me, Ichigo Kurosaki, do you know why Yamamoto asked me specifically to train you? Because you're the strongest? No. Because I know what it means to carry the weight you carry. She raised her blade, pointing it directly at his heart. I was the most feared criminal in Soul Society's early days. I killed without thought, without mercy, because I could. I was strong, and strength was all that mattered. Do you know what changed me? Ichigo shook his head, his own spiritual pressure rising to meet hers. I met someone stronger. Someone who showed me that strength without purpose is just another form of weakness. Her smile turned bitter. That person died in the wars that followed, and I spent 1,000 years trying to honor what they taught me by healing instead of killing. But you can't unlearn what you are, Ichigo. You can only master it. Without warning, she moved. Ichigo barely got Zangetsu up in time to block the strike that should have taken his head. The force of it drove him back 50 feet, his feet carving trenches in the stone floor of the Muken. Before he could recover, she was there again, her blade a silver arc in the darkness aimed at his exposed side. He used Shunpa to evade, reappearing 20 yards away, but she anticipated his movement. Her sword met his before he'd even fully materialized, the clash sending shockwaves through the infinite prison. Too slow. Unohana's voice carried a note of disappointment. You rely too much on your speed, on your overwhelming power. What happens when you face someone who can match both? She proved her point by matching his shunpa step for step, her blade work elegant and absolutely lethal. Every strike was aimed to kill, every movement wasted nothing. This wasn't the sparring Ichigo was used to. This was real combat, the kind where a single mistake meant death. Ichigo found himself being driven back, his defenses barely holding. He tried to counterattack, launching a Getsuga Tensho, but Unohana simply cut through it, dispersing his spiritual energy with a precise slash that shouldn't have been possible. Your sword is an extension of your soul, not a gun that fires energy blasts, she said, pressing her advantage. Feel it. Understand it. Until you do, you'll never. Ichigo saw an opening and took it, finally managing to drive her back with a flurry of strikes. For a moment, he thought he might have gained the upper hand, but then he saw her expression. She was smiling. Really smiling, with genuine joy he'd never seen on her face before. Good, Unohana breathed. You have the instinct. Raw and unrefined, but it's there. Now let me show you what happens when instinct meets experience. What followed was a master class in the art of the sword. Unohana broke down every attack Ichigo attempted, explained every mistake even as she exploited it, and demonstrated techniques that had been honed over centuries of combat. Hours blurred into days in the timeless void of the Muken, marked only by the ringing of steel on steel and the occasional moment of respite when Unohana allowed him to catch his breath. During one such break, Ichigo slumped against the wall, his body screaming in protest. True to her word, Unohana held nothing back. He'd died 3 times already, actually died, only to have her heal him and bring him back to continue the training. The experience was something beyond anything he'd imagined. You're adapting faster than I expected, Unohana said, sitting across from him in a meditative pose. Her sword lay across her lap, and in the dim light, Ichigo could see the intricate patterns etched into the blade. Most Shinigami take decades to reach the level you've achieved in days. Yeah, well, I don't have decades, Ichigo replied, examining the countless cuts and bruises covering his arms. Even now, they were healing, his increased spiritual pressure accelerating his natural recovery. The Quincy could attack any day. They will attack any day, Unohana corrected. But that's not why you're really here, is it? Ichigo looked up sharply. What do you mean? You came down here because you're afraid. Her voice was gentle now, reminiscent of the healer he'd known. Not of the Quincy or Yawatch, but of yourself. Of what you might have to become to win. The observation cut deeper than any of her physical strikes. Ichigo turned away, his jaw tight. I've seen what I'm capable of, he said quietly. When I fought Aizen, when I used the final Getsuga Tensho, I felt something change, like I was looking at an abyss inside myself, something that enjoyed the fight, the destruction. And it scared me more than anything Aizen could do. Good. Unohana's response surprised him. That fear means you're not a monster, Ichigo. Monsters don't fear what they are, they celebrate it. I know because I was one for centuries. What you're feeling is the warrior's curse, the knowledge that you're capable of terrible things and the burden of choosing not to do them unless absolutely necessary. How did you handle it? Ichigo asked, finally meeting her eyes again. How did you go from being Kenpachi to Captain Unohana, the healer everyone trusts? For a long moment, she was silent, and Ichigo wondered if he'd overstepped. Then she stood, her expression distant as if looking at memories from another lifetime. I found a purpose greater than my own strength, she said. Someone showed me that the power to kill could also be the power to protect, if wielded with the right intent. But make no mistake, Ichigo, I didn't become someone else. I simply learned to master what I was. The capacity for violence, for death, it's still there. It will always be there. I just choose when and how to unleash it. She turned back to him, and in her eyes, Ichigo saw something he hadn't expected, understanding. Not pity or condescension, but genuine recognition of the struggle he faced. That's what I'm going to teach you down here, Unohana continued. Not just how to fight better, but how to accept what you are and choose your own path anyway. The Quincy are coming, and you will have to embrace that darkness inside you to stand against them. But you don't have to let it consume you. Ichigo stood, feeling his resolve crystallize. Then let's continue. One more thing first. Unohana's expression turned serious. What we do down here, what I teach you, will change you fundamentally. The techniques I'm about to show you aren't just sword skills, they're ways of thinking, of existing in battle. Once you learn them, you can't unlearn them. You'll see combat differently, see people differently. Are you certain you want this? I don't have a choice, Ichigo replied. If I don't get stronger, everyone I care about will die. There's always a choice. Unohana raised her sword again. But I respect your decision. Now, let's begin the real training. What you experienced before was just a warm-up to see if you could survive what comes next. Ichigo felt a chill run down his spine. A warm-up? He'd died 3 times already, pushed his limits further than ever before, and she called it a warm-up. Don't look so worried, Unohana said, her smile taking on that predatory edge again. Pain is the best teacher, and death is just another learning opportunity down here. By the time we're finished, you'll understand the true art of the sword, the art I mastered 1100 years ago when I first took the name Kenpachi. The next several days, or weeks, time had no meaning in the Muken, became a crucible that forged Ichigo into something new. Unohana was a relentless teacher, pushing him past every limit he thought he had and then showing him that those limits were illusions he'd created himself. She taught him to read an opponent's intent from the slightest shift in posture, to predict attacks 3 moves ahead, to find the killing stroke in any defense. But more than techniques, she taught him philosophy. Every sword style reflects the soul of its practitioner, she explained one day as they circled each other. Zaraki fights with pure instinct and overwhelming power because that's who he is, raw and unrefined. Byakuya's style is elegant and precise because he values order and tradition. What is your style, Ichigo? I don't know, he admitted. I just fight to protect people. Then that's where we start. She attacked, and Ichigo defended, but this time she called out instructions as they fought. Your stance is too aggressive. You're projecting that you want to end the fight quickly. That's a weakness. Learn to mask your intent. Make your defensive posture look offensive, your offensive moves look defensive. The lesson continued, each exchange of blows accompanied by her guidance. Slowly, Ichigo began to understand. It wasn't just about being stronger or faster, it was about being smarter, more adaptable, more complete as a warrior. During their rest periods they talked, really talked, in a way Ichigo had never talked with any of his teachers before. Unohana shared stories from Soul Society's bloody past, tales of battles that had shaped the world they knew. She spoke of the comrades she'd lost, the mistakes she'd made, the burden of living for over 1,000 years with the memories of everyone she'd killed. In turn, Ichigo told her about his life in the living world, about his mother's death and his father's secrets, about the friends he'd made and the responsibilities that had been thrust upon him. Down here in the darkness, stripped of their usual roles and pretenses, they were just 2 warriors trying to understand the weight they carried. You remind me of them, Unohana said one day, her voice soft with memory. The one who changed me. They had your eyes, that determination to protect others even at the cost of themselves. They died because they hesitated, chose to save me instead of finishing an enemy. You loved them, Ichigo said. It wasn't a question. I did. Though I only realized it after they were gone. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Love is a dangerous thing for warriors, Ichigo. It gives you something to protect but also something to lose. Something enemies can exploit. Yeah, well, I figured that out already, Ichigo replied, thinking of Oriheim, of his sisters, of all the people he cared about who'd been endangered because of him. But I wouldn't give them up, even knowing the danger. They're what I fight for. Then never forget that when the darkness calls to you, Unohana said. When the battle fury rises and you want nothing more than to destroy everything in your path, remember their faces. Remember why you picked up the sword in the first place. Time continued its meaningless flow in the Muken, and Ichigo felt himself changing. His movements became more fluid, his attacks more precise. He learned to match Unohana's techniques, to anticipate her strategies. More importantly, he learned to face the darkness inside himself without flinching. There came a moment, Ichigo couldn't say when exactly, where something shifted between them. They were fighting as always, their blades singing in the void, when Unohana suddenly stopped mid-strike. You've learned it, she said, breathing slightly heavier than usual. A smile crossed her face, Not the gentle smile of the healer or the predatory grin of the Kenpachi, but something genuine and warm, the true art of the blade. I can feel it in your strikes, see it in your stance. You've finally understood. Ichigo lowered his sword, suddenly aware of how different he felt. The fear that had driven him down here was still present, but it no longer controlled him. The darkness he'd been afraid of had become just another tool, something he could access when needed without losing himself to it. I had a good teacher, he said simply. For a long moment, they stood there in the darkness of the infinite prison, two warriors who had pushed each other to their absolute limits. And then Unohana did something that surprised him. She laughed. It was a genuine, unguarded sound, free of the weight she usually carried. You know, in all my years I've only had 2 students who truly mastered what I had to teach, she said. The first died centuries ago. The second, well, Zaraki found his own path to strength. But you, Ichigo Kurosaki, you've learned not just the techniques but the wisdom behind them. That's rarer than you might think. What happens now? Ichigo asked. Do we go back up? Return to the war? Soon, Unohana replied. But first, there's one final lesson. The most important one. She sheathed her sword and stepped closer to him. In the dim light, he could see the weariness in her eyes, the weight of all those centuries of violence and healing. Down here, we've been nothing but warriors, she said. We've fought, bled, died, and come back to fight again. But up there, in the real world, we're more than that. We have responsibilities, connections, humanity. The challenge isn't learning to fight, it's learning to return to peace after battle. To not let the warrior consume everything else you are. How do you do that? Ichigo asked. How do you turn it off? You don't turn it off. You learn to live with it, to integrate it. She placed a hand over her heart. The warrior is always here, always ready, but it doesn't have to define every moment of your existence. You find balance, Ichigo. You find people and purposes that remind you why you fight in the first place. Standing there in the Muken's endless void, having shared this intense crucible of training and self-discovery, Ichigo realized something profound had changed between them. What had started as a student-teacher relationship had evolved into something deeper. A mutual understanding between 2 people who carried similar burdens. Thank you, Ichigo said, and he meant it. For everything. For being willing to show me who you really are. Thank you for being willing to see it, Unohana replied. Most people prefer to think of me as just the healer, the gentle captain. You're one of the few who've seen both sides and didn't run away. As they prepared to ascend from the Muken, back to the world of light and the coming war, Ichigo felt fundamentally changed. He was stronger, yes, but more than that, he was more complete. He understood himself better, understood his power and his purpose with a clarity he never had before. The war with the Quincy was coming. Yawatch and his Wandenrake would challenge everything Soul Society stood for. But Ichigo Kurosaki, having descended into darkness and emerged transformed, was finally ready to face them. Beside him, Retsu Unohana, the first Kenpachi, Soul Society's most skilled healer, and now his trusted mentor, walked with the bearing of someone who had made peace with all aspects of herself. Together, they would return to the light, carrying the lessons learned in the depths. Neither of them could have known then how much deeper their connection would grow, or how the bonds forged in the Muken would reshape not just their lives, but the fate of Soul Society itself. The stairs beckoned upward, toward war, toward duty, and toward a future neither of them could yet imagine. Chapter 2, Blood and Understanding. The return to the surface world felt almost jarring after the timeless void of the Muken. Ichigo followed Unohana through the ascending corridors of the underground prison, each level bringing them closer to the structured reality of Soul Society. His body ached in ways he never experienced before, not just physical pain, but a deeper exhaustion that reached into his soul itself. The transition is always difficult, Unohana said without looking back, as if sensing his discomfort. Your spirit has been operating at maximum capacity for an extended period. Now it must readjust to normal existence. How long were we down there? Ichigo asked. Time had become meaningless in the Muken, each moment bleeding into the next in an endless cycle of combat, death, and resurrection. 17 days, Unohana replied, finally stopping at a checkpoint where 2 guards stood at attention. They saluted her with barely concealed nervousness, their eyes carefully avoiding direct contact. though I suspect it felt much longer to you. 17 days. Ichigo processed this information with surprise. It had felt like months, maybe years. Every technique Unohana had drilled into him, every lesson learned through pain and repetition, had seemingly stretched time itself. The guards opened the final door, and sunlight, actual sunlight filtered through Soul Society's perpetual sky, streamed in. Ichigo had to shield his eyes against the brightness, his senses overwhelmed after so long in darkness. Captain Unohana, Ichigo Kurosaki. A hell butterfly materialized before them, its wings shimmering with urgency. Head Captain Yamamoto requests your immediate presence in the 1st Division headquarters. Acknowledged, Unohana said calmly. She glanced at Ichigo. Are you ready to face what comes next? Ichigo straightened despite his exhaustion, feeling the new strength coiled within him like a spring waiting to be released. Ready as I'll ever be. They walked through the Tsuruitai together, and Ichigo noticed the stairs. Shinigami stopped in their tracks, sensing something different about him. His spiritual pressure, which he'd learned to control with far more precision during his training, still carried an edge now, a sharpness that made others instinctively wary. But more surprising were the looks Unohana received. Ichigo had grown accustomed to seeing her as the deadly warrior she truly was, but these Shinigami only knew her as the gentle healer. They couldn't sense what he could, the barely restrained violence that hummed beneath her serene exterior, the ancient power that had been honed through countless battles. They have no idea, do they? Ichigo said quietly as they walked. About who you really are. Most prefer not to know, Unohana replied. The Godiai 13 needs healers, not more killers. I've been content to play that role for centuries. But some of us remember. Kairaku, Yukitake, Yamamoto, they know what I was. What I still am, when necessary. They arrived at the 1st Division to find a gathering of captains already assembled. Shunsui Kairaku stood with his usual relaxed posture, though his eyes were sharp as they tracked Ichigo's entrance. Joshiro Yukitake offered a warm smile, genuine concern evident in his features. Byakuya Kachiki maintained his aristocratic composure, though Ichigo caught a flicker of curiosity in those gray eyes. Kenpachi Zaraki stood apart from the others, his massive form radiating barely contained excitement. His one visible eye locked onto Ichigo, and a grin split his scarred face. Well, well, Zaraki rumbled. You smell different, Ichigo. Stronger. More dangerous. His gaze shifted to Unohana, and something complicated passed across his expression. Respect, challenge, and an old hunger. What did you do to him down there, Captain? I taught him what he needed to know, Unohana replied evenly. Nothing more, nothing less. Before Zaraki could respond, the assembled captains snapped to attention. Head Captain Yamamoto entered, his presence commanding immediate silence. The ancient warrior's eyes, shadowed beneath thick brows, assessed Ichigo with an intensity that felt like standing before an inferno. Ichigo Kurosaki, Yamamoto's voice carried the weight of authority accumulated over 1,000 years. Report on your training. Ichigo stepped forward, feeling the eyes of Soul Society's most powerful warriors upon him. A month ago, he might have been intimidated. Now, having faced death repeatedly at Unohana's hands and come back stronger each time, he met Yamamoto's gaze steadily. The training was successful, Head Captain, Ichigo said. Captain Unohana taught me the true art of the sword. I understand my blade now in ways I never did before. Demonstrate, Yamamoto commanded. Without hesitation, Ichigo drew Zangetsu. The blade sang as it cleared the sheath, but something was different now. The sword felt like a true extension of himself, not just a weapon he wielded but a part of his very soul made manifest. His spiritual pressure flowed through it with perfect precision, controlled yet ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. He moved through a series of forms, not flashy or aggressive, but efficient and deadly. Each strike was calculated, each movement wasted nothing. It was the style Unohana had beaten into him through countless repetitions, the art of killing refined to its purest essence. When he finished, silence hung in the hall. Several captains had unconsciously tensed, hands drifting toward their own weapons. They'd recognized something in his movements, something that spoke to their warrior instincts. I see, Yamamoto said slowly. Captain Unohana, you taught him your style. A version of it, Unohana confirmed. adapted to his nature and capabilities. He'll never fight exactly as I do, but he understands the principles now. Zaraki let out a bark of laughter. Finally! Been waiting for you to get serious, Ichigo. How about we test that new strength of yours right now? Captain Zaraki. Yamamoto's rebuke was mild but firm. There will be time for such things later. For now, we have more pressing concerns. The head captain's expression grew grave. The Wandenrake has been spotted mobilizing. Our intelligence suggests they're preparing for a major assault within the week. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately, playfulness giving way to deadly seriousness. What are our orders? Byakuya asked. Prepare your divisions for war, Yamamoto replied. Double all patrols. Ensure every Shinigami is at combat readiness. Captain Unohana, your 4th Division should prepare for mass casualties. Understood, Unohana said with a slight bow. As for you, Ichigo Kurosaki, Yamamoto turned his full attention to him once more. You will remain in Soul Society until the attack comes. We cannot risk losing you to a preliminary strike. Captain Unohana, I'm assigning him to your division for the time being. Continue his training as you see fit. Ichigo caught the slight widening of several captains' eyes at this announcement. Being assigned to the 4th Division, the non-combat medical division, seemed like an odd choice for someone who just completed intensive combat training. But those who knew Unohana's true nature, Kairaku, Yukitake, Yamamoto, understood the wisdom in it. As you command, head captain, Unohana said. The meeting continued with strategic discussions and deployment plans, but Ichigo's mind was already racing ahead. A week, maybe less, before the Quincy attacked. A week to prepare for a war that would determine the fate of multiple worlds. When the gathering finally dismissed, Unohana gestured for Ichigo to follow her. They walked through the Siriidii in companionable silence, eventually arriving at the 4th Division barracks. The building had a completely different atmosphere from the combat divisions, serene, focused on healing rather than fighting. This will be your quarters during your stay, Unohana said, showing him to a modest room near her own captain's quarters. Rest today. Your body has been pushed beyond normal limits, and even with my healing, you need time to fully recover. What about training? Ichigo asked. If we only have a week, training isn't just about constant combat, Unohana interrupted gently but firmly. Recovery is part of the process. Besides, we've completed the foundation. What remains now is refinement through actual battle. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Ichigo, what we did in the Muken, the intensity of that training, the things I showed you about myself. I want you to know that very few people have seen what you've seen. Most of the Godai 13 would be uncomfortable with the truth. I won't tell anyone, Ichigo assured her. What happened down there stays between us. Something in Unohana's expression softened. Thank you. Rest well, Ichigo. Tomorrow we'll begin adapting your training to work with others. You'll need to coordinate with the other captains when the battle comes. After she left, Ichigo collapsed onto the futon, his exhaustion finally catching up with him. But sleep didn't come easily. His mind replayed the past 17 days, every lesson, every death, every moment of understanding he'd achieved in that infinite darkness. More than that, he found himself thinking about Unohana herself, the woman behind the titles and reputations. Down in the Muken, stripped of pretense and social roles, they'd connected on a level that went beyond typical teacher and student. She trusted him with her true nature, and he'd done the same. It was complicated and potentially problematic given their respective positions and the war looming on the horizon. Ichigo forced himself to stop that line of thinking. There were more important things to focus on right now. The next 6 days passed in a blur of activity. True to her word, Unohana arranged for Ichigo to train with various captains and lieutenant-level fighters, helping him adapt his new skills to group combat situations. Sparring with Byakuya Kichiki proved enlightening. The noble captain's precise, elegant style contrasted sharply with the brutal efficiency Unohana had taught Ichigo, but he found ways to adapt. Byakuya, for his part, acknowledged the improvement with a slight nod, high praise from the stoic Kichiki head. Training with Zaraki was predictably chaotic. The giant captain came at Ichigo with unrestrained bloodlust, forcing him to use every technique he'd learned just to survive. But now, for the first time, Ichigo could read Zaraki's movements, anticipate his strategies. The fight ended in a draw, both warriors grinning despite their injuries. You finally get it. Zaraki laughed as Unohana healed them both afterward. That feeling, that perfect moment in battle where nothing else matters. Welcome to the real fight, Ichigo. The evenings, however, belonged to Unohana. After the day's training sessions concluded, they would meet in a private training ground attached to the 4th Division, continuing to refine his techniques. These sessions were different from the brutal crucible of the Muken, less about survival and more about perfection. Your stance is still too rigid here, Unohana would observe, adjusting his posture with a touch that was both clinical and intimate. Remember, the sword flows like water. Rigid structures break under pressure. During breaks, they talked. Not about combat or strategy, but about life, philosophy, the burden of power. Unohana spoke of her centuries of existence with a candor she rarely showed others, and Ichigo found himself sharing things he never told anyone, fears, doubts, the weight of responsibility that sometimes threatened to crush him. You know, Ichigo said one evening as they sat beneath the stars, both too tired to continue training but not quite ready to part ways, I still don't understand something. Down in the Muken, you were completely different. The real you, I think. But up here, you put on this mask of the gentle healer. Doesn't it get exhausting? Unohana was silent for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. It's not entirely a mask, she finally said. The healer is as much a part of me as the warrior. Perhaps more so now, after so many centuries. I genuinely want to help people, to preserve life rather than take it. But you're right that it's constraining sometimes, pretending that the capacity for violence doesn't exist within me, that I'm only the gentle Captain Unohana. So which one is the real you? Both. Neither. She smiled softly. I'm beginning to think that's a false dichotomy. People are complex, Ichigo. We contain multitudes. The warrior and the healer, the destroyer and the preserver, they can coexist if you let them. Is that what you learned? After all these years? That's what I'm still learning. Unohana turned to look at him directly, and in her eyes, Ichigo saw centuries of experience mixed with something almost vulnerable. You're one of the few people I can be completely honest with. No masks, no pretense. It's liberating, in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Ichigo felt his heart rate increase, suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting, how the moonlight illuminated her features. He was saved from having to respond by the appearance of a hell butterfly. All captains and relevant personnel to the 1st Division immediately, the message relayed. The Wandenrake has been detected. The invasion begins now. They were on their feet instantly, all personal considerations forgotten in the face of imminent battle. As they rushed toward the 1st Division, spiritual pressure erupted throughout the Suriidii, not from within, but from above. Quincy racer platforms materialized in the sky, and figures in white uniforms descended like deadly snowflakes. The war had begun. The 1st Division courtyard had transformed into a command center, with captains receiving rapid-fire orders from Yamamoto. The head captain's spiritual pressure blazed like a sun, his ancient power fully unleashed for the first time in decades. The Wandenrake's advance force has penetrated our defenses, Yamamoto announced grimly. They've deployed throughout the Suriidii. All divisions, engage and eliminate the invaders, protect the civilians and maintain defensive positions around critical infrastructure. What about their main force? Kayaraku asked, his usual playfulness completely absent. According to our intelligence, Yawatch himself remains in their hidden realm, the Wandenrake, Yamamoto replied. This is a probing attack, testing our defenses and capabilities. Do not underestimate them. These Quincy are unlike any we've faced before. An explosion rocked the Suriidii, followed by screams. Through the smoke, Ichigo could see buildings collapsing, Shinigami engaging white-uniformed Quincy in deadly combat. The spiritual pressures clashing throughout Soul Society were immense. These weren't ordinary foot soldiers. Captain Unohana, Yamamoto's voice cut through the chaos. Establish field hospitals at these coordinates. Prioritize saving as many lives as possible. Ichigo Kurosaki will serve as your guard and assist in combat when necessary. Understood, Unohana said, her demeanor shifting instantly to that of a battlefield commander. Ichigo, with me. 4th Division, Implement Emergency Protocol 7. They moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, Unohana directing her division members while Ichigo cleared paths through enemy forces. The Quincy they encountered were formidable, far stronger than the standard Quincy Ichigo had faced before. Each one wielded unique abilities, their racial manipulation sophisticated and deadly, but Ichigo cut through them with a precision that would have been impossible before his training. Every strike was calculated, every movement purposeful. He didn't waste energy on flashy techniques or overwhelming power. Instead, he dispatched enemies with the efficient brutality Unohana had drilled into him. Well trained, one Quincy managed to gasp before Ichigo's blade found his throat. "You fight like one of them, like Unohana." The comment gave Ichigo pause for just a moment. Was he becoming too much like her? Adopting not just her techniques but her mindset? No time to contemplate that now. More Quincy were appearing. An injured Shinigami needed immediate medical attention. Unohana worked with calm efficiency, her hands glowing with healing Kido as she stabilized the wounded. But Ichigo noticed something. When Quincy got too close to her patients, her demeanor changed instantly. The gentle healer vanished, replaced by the ancient warrior. She dispatched threats with casual lethality, then returned to healing without missing a beat. It was a strange dichotomy to witness. Life-giving hands one moment, death-dealing the next. But it worked. Under her protection, the casualty rate in their sector remained remarkably low. "Incoming!" Ichigo shouted, sensing a massive spiritual pressure approaching. A figure descended from the sky, a tall Quincy with long blonde hair and an expression of cold arrogance. His spiritual pressure dwarfed the others they'd faced, marking him as someone important in the Wandenreich hierarchy. "Retsu Unohana," the Quincy said, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "The first Kenpachi. His Majesty was curious if the legends about you were true. He'll be disappointed to learn you've grown soft, playing healer instead of warrior." Unohana stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "And you are?" "Quilljopi, executive member of the Wandenreich. I've been tasked with assessing Soul Society's true strength." His eyes shifted to Ichigo. "And who is this? Your apprentice? His technique bears your signature." "How touching." "Leave," Unohana said simply. "This is your only warning," Quilj laughed. "Or what? You'll set down your medical supplies and fight me? Please. Everyone knows you've abandoned your warrior ways. You're no threat to." He never finished the sentence. Unohana moved with speed that made even Ichigo's eyes widen. One moment she stood among her patients, the next her blade was pressed against Quilj's throat, having crossed the distance in an instant too fast to perceive. "I said leave," she repeated, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I won't ask again." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Quilj's features. He could feel it now, the killing intent radiating from this seemingly gentle woman, the ancient power barely restrained beneath her calm exterior. "Interesting," he managed, carefully backing away. "Perhaps the legends weren't exaggerated after all. But this changes nothing. Soul Society will fall and—" A blade erupted from his chest. Ichigo had moved while Quilj was distracted by Unohana, using the technique she taught him, the silent kill, striking from the opponent's blind spot while their attention was elsewhere. Quilj staggered, blood pooling from the wound. "Impossible! How did you—" "You focused entirely on Captain Unohana," Ichigo said coldly, withdrawing Zangetsu. "Big mistake. Never forget about secondary threats." The Quincy collapsed, his body beginning to dissolve into Reisher. "His Majesty will hear of this. Both of you, the first Kenpachi and her student, dangerous." Then he was gone, his essence scattering on the wind. Unohana looked at Ichigo, something indecipherable in her expression. "Well executed. You used my presence as a distraction perfectly." "Learn from the best," Ichigo replied. Around them, the battle was beginning to die down. The Quincy were retreating, their probing attack complete. Throughout the Suriidii, Shinigami were assessing damage and treating wounded. It had been a costly engagement, but Soul Society had held. For now, as dawn broke over the Suriidii, Ichigo and Unohana stood together amidst the ruins, both covered in blood, some their own, most belonging to enemies. The 4th Division worked tirelessly around them, healing the wounded and recovering the dead. This was just the beginning. Unohana said quietly, her eyes scanning the devastated landscape. The real war hasn't even started. I know, Ichigo replied. But we'll be ready. We have to be. She turned to look at him, and in that moment, something passed between them, a recognition of shared purpose, of the burden they both carried, of the blood they both spilled in the name of protection. Yes, Unohana said softly. Together, we'll be ready. Neither of them noticed Yamamoto watching from a distance, the ancient warrior's expression thoughtful as he observed the two of them standing together. The head captain had lived long enough to recognize something significant when he saw it, something that went beyond mere teacher and student. He wondered if they recognized it themselves yet. The war had begun, but perhaps something else had begun as well, something that would prove just as significant in the battles to come. The aftermath of the Wandenreika's first assault left the Suriidai in a state of controlled chaos. The 4th Division's barracks had been transformed into a massive triage center, with wounded Shinigami filling every available space. The air was thick with the scent of blood and medicinal herbs, punctuated by groans of pain and the steady chanting of healing Kido. Ichigo had been working nonstop for 12 hours, helping move patients, assisting with emergency procedures, and occasionally defending the division from straggling Quincy who'd been cut off from their retreat. His arms ached, his spiritual pressure was running low, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him at any moment. Kurosaki, pressure on this wound. Lieutenant Isane Kotetsu called out, her usual nervousness replaced by professional efficiency. I need to stabilize his spiritual pathways before he. Ichigo was already there, his hands applying precise pressure to the wounded Shinigami's side while Isane worked. He'd learned the basics of field medicine during his time in the 4th Division, enough to be useful in emergencies like this. The Shinigami gasped as Isane's Kido took effect, his spiritual pressure stabilizing. Thank you, he breathed before passing into unconscious recovery. Good work, Isane said, already moving to the next patient. Captain Unohana taught you well. Speaking of whom, Ichigo looked across the crowded ward to where Unohana worked. She moved between patients with serene efficiency, her hands glowing with healing energy. Unlike her subordinates, she showed no signs of fatigue despite having worked longer and harder than any of them. Her spiritual pressure remained steady and strong, an anchor of calm in the storm of chaos. But Ichigo could see what others couldn't. There was a tightness around her eyes, a slight stiffness in her movements. She was pushing herself hard, perhaps too hard, taking on the most critical cases while managing the entire division's emergency response. As if sensing his gaze, Unohana looked up and met his eyes across the room. For a moment, something passed between them, a silent communication that went beyond words. She gave him a slight nod, then returned to her patient. Ichigo. Rukia's voice cut through the organized chaos. She appeared at his side, her own uniform torn and bloodied but her injuries already treated. You're needed at the 1st Division. Emergency captain's meeting. Now? Ichigo looked around at the wounded. But there's so much. Captain Unohana said you should go, Rukia interrupted. This is important. Ichigo found Unohana already walking toward them, having apparently overheard. Up close, he could see the faint lines of strain on her face, subtle signs that would be invisible to most. Go, she said quietly. Your input will be valuable for strategic planning. The 4th Division can manage here. You need to rest too, Ichigo said, keeping his voice low. You've been working nonstop since the attack began. A faint smile touched her lips. I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. This is nothing compared to some of the battles I've endured. Now go. The head captain doesn't like to be kept waiting. Ichigo wanted to argue, but Rukia was already pulling him toward the exit. He cast one last look back at Unohana, who had already returned to her patients, and reluctantly followed. The emergency meeting at the 1st Division was grim. Captains and lieutenants gathered around a strategic map of the Suriidai, markers indicating damage, casualties, and enemy positions before the retreat. Preliminary reports indicate over 300 Shinigami killed, with twice that number seriously wounded, Yamamoto announced, his voice heavy with the weight of those losses. The Wandenreika's assault was surgical. They targeted key infrastructure and command personnel. This was intelligence gathering disguised as a probing attack. They were testing our response times and capabilities, Shunsui Kairaku added, his usual playfulness completely absent. Every engagement was calculated to expose our tactics and power levels, which means they'll be even more prepared for the next attack, Byakuya concluded. We need to adapt our strategies accordingly, agreed Yamamoto said. Captain Kuratsuchi, what did your analysis of the Quincy corpses reveal? Mayuri Kuratsuchi stepped forward, his painted face twisted in disturbing excitement. Fascinating specimens. Their racial manipulation is far more sophisticated than traditional Quincy. They've developed techniques to steal Bankai, nullify our spiritual pressure, and even weaponize shadows. Most intriguing, though, he paused dramatically, is that they seem to have detailed information about each of our abilities. A heavy silence fell over the room. How detailed? Joshiro Yukitake asked, concern evident in his voice. Extremely. They knew the exact range of Captain Kamamura's Bankai, the weakness in Captain Hitsugaya's ice formation patterns, the blind spot in Captain Soifan's Shunko. Someone has been feeding them intelligence, or... Mayuri's grin widened. They have some way of observing us we haven't detected. What about their leader? Ichigo spoke up, drawing attention. Yawatch. What do we know about him? Yamamoto's expression darkened. Yawatch is the progenitor of all Quincy, their king and creator. I faced him 1,000 years ago, during the First Quincy War. He was powerful then, powerful enough that it took everything I had to defeat him. And I failed to kill him completely. The admission hung in the air. Yamamoto, the strongest Shinigami alive, had been unable to permanently defeat this enemy. If he's had 1,000 years to grow stronger. Toshiro Hitsugaya began, but trailed off at the implications. Then we must be prepared for something beyond our previous experiences, Yamamoto finished. Which brings me to why I've called you here, Ichigo Kurosaki. You're one of our strongest assets, and you possess abilities unique among us. Your training with Captain Unohana has only enhanced that. I want your assessment. Based on what you faced today, what do you think our chances are? Ichigo considered carefully before responding. The Quincy we fought were strong, organized, and well-informed. But they weren't invincible. Everyone I killed could be killed. They bled and died like anyone else. The question isn't whether we can win individual battles. It's whether we can survive long enough to reach Yawatch, and whatever final confrontation is coming. Pragmatic analysis, Yamamoto approved. Captain Unohana has taught you to think like a strategist, not just a warrior. Good. You'll be assigned to rapid response. Wherever the fighting is thickest, you'll be deployed. Your ability to adapt to any combat situation makes you ideal for that role. What about protecting the 4th Division? Ichigo asked. Today showed that medical facilities will be targets. Captain Unohana can protect herself, Zaraki interjected with a rough laugh. Trust me on that, Ichigo. Anyone who tries to attack the 4th Division while she's there is in for a nasty surprise. Nevertheless, Yamamoto said, your concern is noted. You'll be stationed near the 4th Division when not actively deployed. Captain Unohana has requested you continue your training with her during the lull before the next attack. Several captains exchanged glances at this. It was unusual for the captain of a non-combat division to request a powerful fighter's continued presence, especially for training purposes, but none voiced their thoughts aloud. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing defensive strategies, evacuation protocols, and contingency plans. By the time it concluded, dawn was breaking over the Suriidii, painting the damaged buildings in shades of gold and crimson. Ichigo made his way back to the 4th Division, his mind churning with everything he'd learned. The war was far from over. In fact, it had barely begun. The Wandenreich would return, stronger and better prepared, and when they did, he found the 4th Division barracks quieter now. Most of the critical patients had been stabilized, and many of the less seriously wounded had been moved to recovery wards. The division members worked with tired efficiency, their initial panic replaced by steady determination. Isane found him as he entered. Kurosaki, Captain Unohana is in her office. She asked to see you when you returned. How is she? Ichigo asked. Exhausted, though she'd never admit it, Isane said quietly. She healed over 100 critical cases personally. That kind of sustained output, even for someone of her power, please convince her to rest. She won't listen to me. Ichigo nodded and made his way to Unohana's office. He found the door slightly ajar, and through it, he could hear the soft sound of running water. He knocked gently. "Enter," came Unohana's voice. He stepped inside to find her washing her hands in a basin, her back to him. Her captain's haori hung on a rack, and her uniform was stained with blood, some red, some the darker color of Quincy Rasher. As she turned, he saw the exhaustion she'd hidden so well during the crisis now evident in her features. "The meeting concluded?" she asked, drying her hands. "Yeah. Yamamoto wants me on rapid response, but stationed near the 4th Division when not deployed. He said you requested I continue training with you." "I did." Unohana gestured to the chairs in her office. "Please sit. We need to talk." Ichigo settled into one of the chairs, suddenly aware of how tired he was himself. The adrenaline that had sustained him through the battle and its aftermath was fading, leaving behind bone-deep weariness. Unohana poured tea with steady hands, a small ritual of normalcy amid the chaos. She handed him a cup and took the seat across from him, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. "Today was your first real taste of war," she said quietly. "Not a duel with a powerful enemy, but the chaos of a true battlefield. How are you handling it?" Ichigo sipped the tea, considering his answer. "It was different than I expected. More confusing, more brutal. I kept thinking about all the people who died, who I couldn't save. That burden never gets easier," Unohana said. "Every soul I couldn't heal today weighs on me. Every Shinigami who died before reaching the 4th Division feels like a personal failure, but dwelling on it serves no purpose except to paralyze us for the next crisis. How do you deal with it? After centuries of war, how do you keep going?" "By remembering why I fight." She looked at him directly, and in her eyes he saw the weight of all those centuries, the losses, the victories, the endless cycle of violence and healing. "I fight to ensure there are fewer deaths tomorrow than there were today. I heal to give others the chance to continue their own fights. It's not much, but it's purpose enough." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the day's events. Outside, the Siriidii was slowly returning to some semblance of normalcy, crews working to repair damage and restore order. "Isain said you should rest," Ichigo finally said. "That you pushed yourself too hard today." A slight smile crossed Unohana's face. "Isain worries too much." "I'm fine." "You're exhausted," Ichigo countered. "I can see it, even if no one else can. You've been masking it with spiritual pressure control, but I know how much energy you expended today." Unohana's smile widened slightly. "Perceptive. You're learning to read more than just combat intentions." "Yes, I'm tired. But there's still work to be done, patients to check on, reports to file, which can wait a few hours while you sleep," Ichigo interrupted. "Come on, Captain. You taught me that recovery is part of training. Practice what you preach." For a moment, he thought she might argue. Then, surprisingly, she laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that transformed her features. "You're right, of course. When did the student become the teacher?" She stood, and Ichigo noticed the slight stiffness in her movements. "Very well. I'll rest for a few hours. But I want you to rest as well. You've been running on adrenaline since the attack began." "Deal," Ichigo agreed, standing as well. As they walked toward the door, Unohana paused, turning to face him. They stood close in the small office, and Ichigo was suddenly very aware of the intimacy of the moment, the shared exhaustion, the understanding that needed no words. "Ichigo," she said quietly, "what we face today is just the beginning. The Wandenrake will return with greater force, and when they do, we'll both be tested in ways we can't yet imagine. I need to know, can I count on you to stand beside me through whatever comes?" "Always," Ichigo replied without hesitation. "We're in this together, Captain." Something shifted in her expression, a softening, a vulnerability rarely shown. "Retsu," she said. "When we're alone, you can call me Retsu. I think we've moved beyond the need for such formality." The use of her given name felt significant, a boundary crossed. "Retsu," Ichigo said, testing the name. "I like it. Good. Now let's both get some rest before the next crisis demands our attention." Over the following days, an uneasy peace settled over the Siriidii. Repairs continued, defensive positions were strengthened, and the Godii 13 prepared for the inevitable next assault. But beneath the surface activity, tensions simmered. Ichigo found himself falling into a routine. Mornings were spent helping the 4th Division with ongoing recovery efforts. Afternoons involved training sessions with various captains, refining his abilities and learning to coordinate with Soul Society's elite. Evenings, however, belonged to his continued training with Unohana, or Retsu, as he now thought of her when they were alone. These evening sessions were different from their time in the Muken. They still sparred, still pushed each other's limits, but there was an ease to their interactions now. They'd been through combat together, shared blood and exhaustion, and something fundamental had changed in their relationship. Your form has improved significantly, Retsu observed one evening as they practiced in a private training ground. You're incorporating the techniques more naturally now, making them your own rather than just copying mine. Had a good teacher, Ichigo replied, blocking her strike and countering with a fluid combination she'd taught him. They exchanged a rapid series of blows, both moving with the deadly grace of master swordsmen. But now, when they fought, there was an element of play wasn't quite the right word, but something close. A joy in the exchange that went beyond mere training. Stop, Retsu said suddenly, lowering her blade. Ichigo immediately complied, concern flickering across his face. What's wrong? Nothing. I just... She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. I wanted to tell you something. In all my centuries, I've only trained a handful of students. Most couldn't handle the intensity, and those who could eventually moved on to find their own paths. But you, Ichigo, training you has been different. Rewarding in ways I hadn't anticipated. Because I'm a quick learner? Ichigo joked, trying to lighten the suddenly serious mood. Because you see all of me and don't look away, Retsu said quietly. The warrior and the healer, the monster I was and the person I try to be. You accept both without judgment or fear. That's rare, precious even. Ichigo felt his heart rate increase. They'd been dancing around something for days now, ever since that moment in her office, maybe even since their time in the Muken. And connection that went deeper than teacher and student, beyond comrades in arms. I could say the same about you, Ichigo replied. You've seen me at my worst, desperate, afraid, struggling with the darkness inside me. And you didn't try to fix it or shame me for it. You just helped me understand it, accept it. They stood facing each other in the moonlit training ground, the space between them charged with unspoken meaning. Retsu took a step closer, then another, until they stood within arm's reach. This is complicated, she said softly. You're my student. I'm centuries older than you. We're in the middle of a war. There are a dozen reasons why we shouldn't, but... Ichigo prompted, but I find myself not caring about those reasons as much as I should. She reached up, her hand gently touching his cheek. Tell me I'm not imagining this, Ichigo. Tell me you feel it too. Instead of answering with words, Ichigo closed the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that was both tentative and inevitable, weeks of building tension finally finding release. Retsu responded immediately, her hand sliding to the back of his neck, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Ichigo rested his forehead against hers. We shouldn't do this, Retsu whispered, though she made no move to step away. It's irresponsible. We should be focused on the war, on our duties. This could compromise everything. Probably, Ichigo agreed. But I don't care. For the first time since this whole thing started, I feel like something makes sense. Us makes sense. Retsu pulled back slightly to look at him, her eyes searching his face. You understand what you're saying? What this would mean? I'm not good at relationships, Ichigo. I've lived too long, lost too many people. I've built walls to protect myself, and tearing them down scares you, Ichigo finished. I get it. It scares me too. But everything about this war scares me. At least this is something worth being scared about. A smile, genuine and warm, crossed her features. When did you become so wise? I had a good teacher, Ichigo repeated, grinning. They kissed again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. Weeks of tension, of unspoken attraction, of connection forged in blood and combat, all of it poured into that moment. When they finally separated, both knew that something fundamental had shifted. They couldn't go back to being just teacher and student, just comrades in arms. Whatever this was between them, It was real and powerful and potentially very complicated. We need to be careful, Retsu said, her practical nature reasserting itself. The Godai 13 has strict regulations about fraternization, and given our positions, I know. We'll be discreet. Ichigo took her hand, marveling at how natural it felt. But I'm not giving this up, Retsu. Not for regulations or propriety or because it's complicated. Not unless you want me to. I don't, she admitted. I should, but I don't. Very well, we'll navigate this together. Carefully and discreetly, but together. They spent the next hour talking, really talking in a way that went beyond their previous conversations. Retsu shared more about her long life, the love she'd lost, the mistakes she'd made, the isolation that came with living for centuries while everyone around you aged and died. Ichigo spoke of his fears about the war, his complicated feelings about his role as a substitute Shinigami, his desire to protect everyone even knowing it was impossible. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with physical attraction and everything to do with two people allowing themselves to be truly vulnerable with each other. I should go, Ichigo finally said as the moon reached its zenith. People will start to wonder if I'm out here all night. Probably wise, Retsu agreed, though she made no move to release his hand. Tomorrow, we should continue working on your coordination with the other divisions. The next attack could come at any time. Tomorrow, Ichigo confirmed. Then, with a smile, though I might need some private lessons in the evening. You know, to work on my form. Retsu laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. Your form needs quite a bit of work, now that you mention it. I suppose additional evening sessions are warranted. They parted with a final kiss, both returning to their respective quarters. Ichigo lay awake for a long time afterward, his mind racing. He'd come to Soul Society to train, to prepare for the war with the Wandenrake. He hadn't expected to fall for his teacher, especially not someone as complex and powerful as Retsu Unohana. But life, he was learning, rarely followed expected paths. And somehow, amidst the chaos and violence of impending war, he'd found something worth fighting for beyond just abstract duty or protection. He'd found someone who understood him completely, who saw all his flaws and strengths and accepted both. Someone who challenged him to be better while accepting who he was. Across the compound, Retsu lay in her own quarters, staring at the ceiling with a small smile on her face. For the first time in centuries, she felt something beyond duty, beyond the endless cycle of violence and healing. She felt hope. And possibility. And the terrifying, exhilarating sensation of opening her heart to someone again after so long. Whatever came next, whatever horrors the Wandenrake would unleash, at least she wouldn't face it alone. She had Ichigo, and somehow, that made everything seem more bearable. Outside, the Siriidii slept uneasily, unaware of the shift that had occurred between two of its strongest warriors. The war was far from over, and greater challenges lay ahead. But for now, in this moment of peace between storms, two souls had found each other. And that, perhaps, was its own kind of victory. Chapter 4, An Impossible Proposal. The days following that first kiss were a careful dance of discretion and stolen moments. Ichigo and Retsu maintained perfect professionalism in public. He remained the respectful student, she the composed teacher. But in private, behind closed doors or in secluded training grounds, they allowed themselves to explore the connection growing between them. It was a week after their first kiss when the incident occurred that would change everything. The alarm bells rang at dawn, their urgent clanging shattering the relative peace that had settled over the Siriidii. Ichigo bolted upright in his quarters, already reaching for Zangetsu before he was fully awake. The spiritual pressure emanating from the eastern sector was massive. Multiple captain-level Quincy had appeared simultaneously. He burst from his room to find the 4th Division already mobilizing. Retsu stood in the center of the courtyard, issuing rapid orders to her subordinates with calm authority. Her eyes found his across the chaos, and something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding. Ichigo, she called out, her voice carrying clearly despite the surrounding noise. Eastern Sector, 3 captain-level signatures. I'm deploying with you, Captain. The wounded Aisane began to protest. Will be in your capable hands, Lieutenant, Retsu interrupted smoothly. You've trained for this. I have complete faith in your abilities. Right now, our priority is preventing more casualties by eliminating the threat quickly. Minutes later, Ichigo and Retsu were racing across the rooftops toward the eastern sector, their spiritual pressures flaring as they moved. The destruction became apparent as they approached, entire buildings reduced to rubble, fires burning out of control, and the unmistakable signs of intense combat. There! Ichigo spotted them, 3 Quincy in white uniforms, each radiating power that dwarfed the enemies they'd faced in the first assault. They stood amid the ruins of what had been the 8th Division barracks, and around them lay the bodies of Shinigami who'd tried to stop them. Captain Shunsui Kairaka was already engaged with one of them, his dual Zanpakuto flashing as he fought. But even the usually unflappable captain appeared to be struggling, his opponent matching him move for move. Ichigo, take the one on the left, Retsu commanded, her hand already on her Zanpakuto's hilt. I'll handle the other 2. That's not open for debate, she cut him off, her eyes hard. Trust in your training and in yourself. Now go! Ichigo launched himself at his target, a tall Quincy with cold blue eyes and a bow that crackled with compressed erasure. The Quincy smiled, raising his weapon. Ichigo Kurosaki, the student of the first Kenpachi. I've been looking forward to this. The arrow he released moved faster than sound, but Ichigo was ready. His training with Retsu had taught him to read intent before action, and he'd already moved before the Quincy's muscles had fully contracted. Zangetsu swept up, deflecting the arrow with a precise strike that sent it careening harmlessly into the sky. Impressive, the Quincy acknowledged. But let's see how you handle this. He released a barrage of arrows, each one splitting into dozens more mid-flight. The sky filled with deadly projectiles, more than any normal fighter could possibly dodge. But Ichigo wasn't normal anymore. He moved through the storm of arrows like water flowing around stones, each movement economical and precise. This was what Retsu had taught him, not to rely on overwhelming power or brute force, but to find the paths between attacks, to move with purpose and precision. He closed the distance in seconds, Zangetsu singing as it cleaved through the Quincy's bow. The enemy leaped back, already forming another weapon from pure erasure, but Ichigo pressed the advantage. Every strike was aimed at vital points, every movement forcing his opponent into defensive positions. You fight like her, the Quincy gasped as he barely parried another thrust. That efficiency, that precision. She really did teach you everything. Not everything, Ichigo replied, driving his blade through the Quincy's guard and into his shoulder. I'm still learning. Meanwhile, Retsu faced her 2 opponents with an expression of serene calm that somehow made her more terrifying. The 2 Quincy had expected an easy target. After all, wasn't she just a healer? Someone who'd abandoned her warrior ways centuries ago. They learned the truth too late. Her Zanpakuto, Minazuki, was already released, its flesh-like form coiling through the air. But it wasn't being used for healing. One Quincy screamed as the blade opened his chest from shoulder to hip, while the other barely managed to dodge a strike that would have taken his head. The report said you'd gone soft, one of them managed, his spiritual pressure flaring as he tried to mount a defense. That you weren't a threat anymore. Reports, Retsu said softly, her blade moving in a graceful arc that forced both opponents back, can be misleading. She moved like death incarnate, every strike lethal, every movement wasted nothing. This was Yuichiro Unohana, the first Kenpachi, the most feared criminal in Soul Society's history. This was the woman who had bathed in the blood of her enemies and enjoyed it. The Quincy realized their mistake, but knowledge came too late. Retsu cut them down with brutal efficiency, her expression never changing from that serene calm. It was almost more disturbing than if she'd smiled or shown pleasure in the killing. Ichigo finished his own opponent and turned to see Retsu standing amid the fallen Quincy, her Zanpakuto dripping blood. For a moment, he saw her as she truly was, not the gentle healer, not even just the deadly warrior, but something that encompassed both. A complete person who contained multitudes, who could heal with the same hands that dealt death, and he loved her for it. All of it. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just attraction or respect or the connection forged in combat. This was love, deep, complicated, terrifying love for a woman who'd lived over 1,000 years, who'd seen civilizations rise and fall, who could kill him without breaking a sweat but chose instead to teach him, to trust him, to let him see her true self. Ichigo! Shunsui's shout broke through his revelation. Above you! Ichigo looked up to see a fourth Quincy descending from the sky, one they'd missed in the initial assessment. His spiritual pressure was enormous, easily surpassing the three they'd just defeated, and his bow was already drawn, aimed not at Ichigo but at Retsu, who was focused on checking the fallen Quincy and hadn't sensed the new threat. Time seemed to slow. Ichigo saw the arrow release, saw its trajectory, saw that Retsu wouldn't be able to dodge in time. Her attention was elsewhere, her guard momentarily down in the aftermath of her own battle. He moved without thinking, without hesitation. Shuunpa carried him across the distance in an instant, and he threw himself between Retsu and the arrow. Zangetsu came up, deflecting the projectile, but three more followed immediately. He managed to block two, but the third. The arrow pierced his side, razor tearing through flesh and muscle. The pain was immediate and intense, but Ichigo gritted his teeth and stayed on his feet, positioning himself between Retsu and the attacker. Ichigo. Retsu's voice carried a note of panic he'd never heard before. What are you? Stay back, he gritted out, raising Zangetsu despite the blood flowing from his wound. I've got this. The Quincy, a stern-faced man with graying hair, landed gracefully, his expression one of mild interest. Foolish. You could have dodged. Why throw your life away for her? Because she's worth it, Ichigo replied simply. He launched himself at the Quincy with renewed fury. The wound in his side screamed with every movement, his spiritual pressure fluctuating as his body tried to cope with the injury. But he'd been hurt worse than this before, had died and come back multiple times during his training. Pain was just information, just another factor to account for. The Quincy was stronger than the others, faster and more skilled. He forced Ichigo back with a combination of arrow techniques and close-quarters combat that would have overwhelmed the Ichigo of a month ago. But Ichigo wasn't that person anymore. Retsu had forged him into something harder, sharper, more complete. He adapted to his opponent's rhythm, found the patterns in his attacks, and began to counter effectively despite his injury. Impressive, the Quincy admitted as Ichigo's blade scored a deep cut across his arm. But you're bleeding out, boy. You have minutes at most before shock sets in. Why not retreat? Let the healer save you. Because I don't need saving, Ichigo shot back, pressing his attack. I need to finish this. Behind him, he could sense Retsu finishing off the last of the fallen Quincy who'd still been alive, ensuring they couldn't rejoin the fight. Then her spiritual pressure flared as she recognized what Ichigo was doing, slowly, methodically breaking down his opponent's defenses despite his own injury. The final exchange was almost anticlimactic. The Quincy overextended on a thrust, confident that Ichigo's wounded state would slow his response. Instead, Ichigo moved with the speed and precision of his training, Zangetsu finding the opening and driving through the Quincy's chest. Impossible, the Quincy gasped, looking down at the blade impaling him. You should be, the wound. Pain is just information, Ichigo said, echoing one of Retsu's lessons. Learning not to let it control you was part of my training. The Quincy dissolved into erasure, and Ichigo finally allowed himself to stumble. The adrenaline that had sustained him through the fight was fading, and with it came the full realization of how badly he was hurt. The arrow had torn through muscle and possibly nicked something vital. Blood soaked his shahakusho, and his vision was starting to blur. Retsu was there instantly, her hands glowing with healing Kido. You idiot, she said, her voice tight with emotion even as her hands worked with professional efficiency. You complete and utter idiot. Why would you? Because I love you, Ichigo said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Maybe it was the blood loss making him reckless, or maybe it was the near-death experience, but suddenly keeping it inside seemed impossible. I love you, Retsu. All of you, the healer and the warrior, the gentle teacher and the deadly Kenpachi. And I couldn't let you get hurt, not when I could prevent it. Retsu's hands stilled for just a moment, her eyes widening. Around them, the sounds of the Tsuruidai continued, other Shinigami arriving to secure the area, fires being extinguished, the wounded being tended to. But in that moment, it was just the two of them. You love me, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. Yeah, Ichigo confirmed, managing a weak smile despite the pain. Probably poor timing to mention it, but there it is. Poor timing, Retsu agreed, but there were tears in her eyes now, even as her hands resumed their healing work. You could have died, Ichigo. That arrow was meant to kill, and taking it from me was worth it, he finished. Every time, Retsu. I do it every time. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his, her tears falling onto his face. I love you too, she whispered. I have for weeks now, maybe since the Muken. I was just too afraid to say it, too afraid to acknowledge what it meant. And now I'm still afraid, she admitted. But I'm more afraid of losing you. Of not having said it and regretting it forever. I've lived for over 1,000 years, Ichigo, and in all that time, I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you. You see me, truly see me, and you don't flinch. You don't try to change me or hide parts of me away. You just accept it all. Kind of hard not to when it's all so amazing, Ichigo managed, his strength slowly returning as her healing took effect. Even the scary parts. Especially the scary parts. Retsu laughed through her tears, then kissed him, soft and gentle despite the blood and chaos surrounding them. When she pulled back, her expression had shifted from fear to determination. We need to talk, she said. Really talk about what this means, about where we go from here. But first, let me finish healing you properly. Can you stand? Ichigo tested his legs and found them steady enough. The wound in his side was closed now, though he'd lost enough blood that full recovery would take time. Yeah, I can stand. Good. Let's get you back to the 4th Division. I want to do a complete examination, make sure there's no internal damage I missed. She helped him to his feet, her arms supporting him more than was strictly necessary given his recovering strength. Then we're going to have a very serious conversation about throwing yourself in front of arrows. Only when they're aimed at you, Ichigo countered with a grin. That's not as reassuring as you seem to think it is. They made their way back through the damaged Tsuruidai, passing other Shinigami who were dealing with the aftermath of the attack. Shansui intercepted them briefly, his expression serious despite his usual laid-back demeanor. That was quite a display, the 8th Division captain said, his eyes moving between Ichigo and Retsu with knowing understanding. Both of you fought magnificently. The Quincy never stood a chance. Thank you, Captain Kairaku, Retsu replied formally. Shansui, please. We've known each other too long for such formality, Retsu. He smiled, but there was something sad in his eyes. Be careful, both of you. People are going to start noticing, if they haven't already. And the Central 46. Well, they have opinions about such things. Let them have their opinions, Retsu said with unexpected firmness. I've spent 1,000 years living by others' rules and expectations. Perhaps it's time I started making my own choices. Shuansui's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say something like that. You deserve happiness, old friend. Both of you do. Just be prepared for the complications that come with it. After he left, Ichigo glanced at Retsu. He knows. Shunsui has always been perceptive. And discreet, fortunately. He won't say anything. She tightened her grip on his arm slightly. But he's right about complications. What I said back there, about making my own choices. I meant it, Ichigo. I'm tired of hiding, of pretending to be only what others expect me to be. With you, I don't have to do that. They reached the 4th Division, and Retsu immediately commandeered a private examination room, waving off Isane's attempts to help. Once the door was closed and sealed with a privacy kido, she turned to face Ichigo fully. Take off your shahakusho, she commanded, her tone professional despite the circumstances. I need to see the full extent of the damage. Ichigo complied, revealing the already healing wound in his side. Retsu's examination was thorough and professional, her hands glowing with diagnostic kido as she checked for internal injuries. But occasionally, her touch would linger just slightly longer than strictly necessary, a subtle intimacy beneath the medical procedure. You're lucky, she finally pronounced. The arrow missed anything vital by millimeters. Full recovery should take about 3 days with rest and proper treatment. 3 days I don't have if another attack comes, Ichigo pointed out. 3 days you'll take anyway, Retsu countered firmly. You're no good to anyone if you push yourself into permanent injury or death. Besides, her expression softened, I need you alive and healthy, for purely selfish reasons. Oh? What reasons would those be? Instead of answering, she leaned forward and kissed him, deeper and more passionate than their previous kisses, as if she were trying to convey through action what words couldn't express. When she finally pulled back, both were breathing heavily. Those reasons, she said. Ichigo reached up, cupping her face gently. Retsu, about what I said out there. I meant it. I love you. And I know it's complicated and probably crazy, but I need you to know that this isn't just, I don't know, adrenaline or proximity or gratitude for training me. This is real. I know, she replied softly. I can feel it, Ichigo. The connection between us, it goes deeper than anything I've experienced before. And yes, it's terrifying. The age difference alone. I've lived over 1,000 years. I've seen empires rise and fall. You're so young, with your whole life ahead of you. What right do I have to? The right I'm giving you, Ichigo interrupted. Age doesn't matter, Retsu. Experience doesn't matter. What matters is this. He placed his hand over her heart, and this, he moved it to his own chest, what we feel for each other. Everything else is just details we'll figure out as we go. Retsu closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated. Ichigo took a deep breath, then said something that surprised even himself. Marry me. Retsu's eyes snapped open, shock evident on her features. What? Marry me, Ichigo repeated, more certain now. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but we're in the middle of a war. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed for either of us. Today showed me that. I don't want to waste time being cautious or worrying about what other people think. I want to be with you, officially and completely. So marry me, Retsu. For a long moment she just stared at him, her expression cycling through disbelief, fear, hope, and finally settling on something that looked like wonder. You're serious, she said. Completely. Ichigo, you understand what you're asking? Marriage in Soul Society is binding, permanent. And with my position, your role here, the Central 46 will have opinions. Your friends might not understand. There will be complications, obstacles. I don't care, Ichigo said firmly. Let them complicate. Let them object. I want to marry you, Retsu Unohana. I want everyone to know that I love you and that you're mine and I'm yours. If that causes problems, we'll deal with them together. Tears were flowing freely down Retsu's face now, the first time Ichigo had seen her truly cry. No one has ever, in all my centuries, no one has ever wanted me like this. All of me, the monster and the healer, the warrior and the woman. You're offering me something I never thought I could have. Is that a yes? She laughed through her tears. You're impossible. Absolutely impossible. This is the most impractical, ill-timed, inappropriate proposal I've ever heard of. But yes. She grabbed his face and kissed him hard. Yes, I'll marry you. I must be insane, but yes. 1,000 times yes. They held each other in that private examination room, two warriors who'd found something more precious than any victory in battle, a connection that transcended age, position, and circumstance. Outside, the Suriidii continued its recovery from the latest attack, unaware that within the 4th Division, a decision had been made that would reshape Soul Society's future. When they finally separated, both were grinning like fools. We need to tell Yamamoto, Retsu said, her practical nature reasserting itself even through the joy. He needs to hear it from us before rumors start spreading, and the Central 46 will need to approve the union. Will they? Ichigo asked. Probably not initially. A captain marrying a substitute Shinigami, especially one not from one of the noble families, it's unprecedented. But, her smile turned slightly predatory, I've never much cared what the Central 46 thought of me. If they object, they can take it up with the first Kenpachi. That's the woman I'm going to marry, Ichigo said with satisfaction. Though we should probably prepare for some pushback. Not everyone is going to be happy about this. No, Retsu agreed. But happiness, I've learned, isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about finding the one person who sees you completely, and choosing to build a life with them anyway. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. Are you ready for what comes next? Because once we tell Yamamoto, there's no going back. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, Ichigo replied. They stood together in the examination room, hands clasped, hearts aligned, facing an uncertain future with certainty in each other. The war with the Wandenrake raged on, complications awaited, and Soul Society's rigid traditions would surely push back against their decision. But none of that mattered in this moment. They had found something rare and precious: love in the midst of chaos, connection in the face of death, hope in the darkest of times, and together they would face whatever came next.